disclosure. Mr. Hughes and I go back quite a number of years. We've worked together. He's been the chief procurement officer for a number of places and states and various other public procurement duties. Mitzi, I think this is the first time I've had a chance to meet with you. Rick and I both served on the boards for the UPPCC and the National Association of State Procurement Officers or procurement officials. And for your benefit, as you understand, we have a series of lunch and learns with many of our organizations that provide services and solutions to public procurement officials. And we're hosting these sessions for the benefit of our anyone in the county here of Broward who is participating in our public procurement. So we appreciate the time that you have today. I'm going to turn it back over to you guys or to Alexa to kick this off. And thanks again. Rick, I'll look forward to talking to you one-on-one at some other point. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob. Look forward to it.
All right, Rick, if you want to go ahead and begin. Or Mitzi,
Okay.
Not sure who you'll be speaking first.
Yeah, I'll start off. First of all, just good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak to you today. A little bit of background, as Bob said, we worked together in the past. Prior to joining GSS about a year ago, so I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary, I was the deputy CPO for the state of Arizona. And prior to that, I was actually the CPO for the state of Wisconsin. I did that for 3 years. I did Arizona for 3. I did Arizona for 3 years. Wisconsin, I was in the CPO role for 7 years. And prior to Wisconsin, I was with Illinois government in procurement leadership roles. I ended my time with Illinois as an appointee on the Executive Ethics Commission with an oversight on state procurement laws compliance. So I did that for Illinois. And prior to my public sector experience, I really had a lot of jobs. I probably would take up way too much time to tell you about all of it, but I worked for companies that you probably would mostly recognize: United Airlines, Motorola, IBM, KPMG Consulting. I had a chance to do some pretty interesting things and had good experience to bring to public procurement, which when I first joined, I was recruited by a law school classmate of mine into Illinois government, and he kind of asked me to commit to 2 or 3 years. And once I got into the office and started working with the people who do the work that you guys do and deal with the issues that you deal with and the challenges, I just kind of fell in love with it. Like I thought, this is something I really enjoy. And so then I've stayed with it ever since. So I'll stop at that and just turn it over to Mitzi to give a little background about her.
Hi, good morning for me and Rick, and good afternoon for all of you guys. Mitzi Loftus. I am a lifer government. I started right out of college. My first 10 years were not in procurement, but then 99, I started procurement and had been in and out. Ending that stint as the statewide purchasing director for the state of Illinois. Mike Smith and I and Rick and I all worked together. Then I left for 4 years, went private sector to government-facing software solutions. One was an ERP and one was an e-procurement solution, and then went back to the state as the chief of staff at the Illinois State Police. Retired last year. That lasted about 9 months before I came to work for Government Sourcing Solutions. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really just, I guess, here for moral support and just, in case anything transitions into anything else that I can add any insight into, but also just to listen and to meet all you guys. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mitzi. All right. Now, I haven't done a slide presentation on Teams before, so bear with me a little bit. I'm going to see if I can just, I think within PowerPoint, I can do team share, but since I'm not controlling the meeting, I think I just used the share button. Is that probably
Correct.
the right thing to do? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to do that and not make the mistake that I almost made. Um, okay, let's see.
So if,
Oh,
let's see.
okay,
Oh, yep,
little glitch.
there you go.
Oh, you can see the slideshow now?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay.
not in present mode. I don't
correct.
think it's more in your, uh,
Yeah, right. So I'm gonna let's see here.
Bottom
Go
right,
ahead.
Rick.
So now can you
Yeah.
you can't see it now, can you? So I
No,
did
but
there
try
should,
selecting present there and see if that works.
yeah, I
It
went
says you're
back.
about to.
top
So
middle of your screen, present.
are you seeing this PowerPoint live thing?
There we
There you
Ah,
go.
voila.
Okay. All right. Can everyone see this well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So this opening line on the slide deck with the beautiful Broward County colors and logo, um, opening line, driving improvement through procurement. It reflects government sourcing solutions, sort of respect and admiration for the public procurement professionals. And mine too, like we recognize that improvement in government, good things in government really don't happen without the public procurement professionals and the procurement office executing an effective procurement that leads to a contract that leads to performance of services or delivery of goods for the greater community. And so, that's just of government, and that's why I like the field, and I love the people that do the work, and so that's my sort of salute to Broward County Public Procurement Office. And then I'll just move to the next slide that says, um, a little bit about GSS. Everyone can see this slide with sort of like business cards on it.
Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. So GSS was formed in the early 2000s by a former CPO from the state of Pennsylvania, David Yarkin. And David had two observations uh, during his time being responsible for procurement for the state of Pennsylvania. Two big observations. One was that cooperative procurement and cooperative purchasing was really a big aid to state government because he could select a contract that had been competed publicly by another state and implement it. He could, by signing a participating addendum, he could implement that contract without doing a procurement that sometimes has a risk of completion and certainly a timeline that delays sort of improvement, if you will. So that was one observation, is this idea of cooperative procurement is really valuable to state government and local governments as well. So that was one observation. And the other observation he had was there's a lot of businesses that work with government that really struggle with how to do that well, and how to enter the field, and then even once you're in the field, be a successful contractor. So those were like the two sort of founding observations that led him to form um, government sourcing solutions. So it was historically all former CPOs that were leaders of the firm. Now you can see with some of the business cards there that we've kind of branched to other experts from public sector, including like CIOs, administrative chief officers. Um, our CEO Brian Sealander was a young procurement whippersnapper who was doing 15 procurement initiatives across the country when in the early 2000s, while David was at the state of Pennsylvania. Brian became our CEO just in the last couple years. And so Brian later worked in the consulting field, and he also was chief of staff for um, government leaders. So we've got this cross-functional approach because we recognize that really the innovative, progressive governments have a collaborative style. And I'm sure Bob is, Mr. Gleason there is, working with the team to take on that kind of approach to your challenges in Broward County. So that's kind of like the evolution of GSS in its current form. And then I'm going to go to the next slide, which starts with, so this is my fancy slide. I'm hoping that I can make this work to do the, so we have this government expertise. Let's see. It's not cooperating with me. Let me try this. There we go. There's the fancy stuff. So again, it's this cross-functional expertise: procurement, CIO, administrative chief, agency leaders. We think that Mitzi brings a great dimension to the firm as a chief of staff for the law enforcement agency for the state of Illinois in her last stint of public service. So then we've got cooperative contracts being part of the secret sauce, if you will. And then, we think that all three of these wheels, if you will, gears, suppliers, agency leaders, and central government are the key to success and improvement in government. And then we've got this back and forth that takes place between GSS and the cooperative contract sources as well as government, which eventually leads to what we think are optimal solutions. So some people think of GSS, they kind of think of us as a co-op, and we don't really do co-op contracts. We've done it personally, individually in our own states and our background, but we don't do cooperative contracting. Some people have asked us to do it. We've kicked it around, but it really is something that we've tried to focus on what we think we do best. And it's this I would call it, facilitation mode where we work like this slide suggests. Does that all make sense to everyone? So far? Yeah, I guess everyone's muted, so I guess I'm not going to get much feedback from folks, but if it doesn't make any sense, there's a thumbs up. Oh, great. That's great feedback.
Love that thumbs up.
Yeah. So now, whoops. Oh, shoot. I think I'm going to have to minimize this because it's otherwise throwing me off. Okay, so you guys have been talking with cooperative purchasing entities, and they would be covering this when and why. I think all of these factors on this chart sort of suggest when and why cooperative purchasing is selected, and it's a range of things that frankly make a lot of sense, and I think you all would tend to agree with it. Be more efficient, be more strategic in approach, and really that more strategic in approach is, hey, we can use a contract that was established by someone else competitively, save the time on that, and then work on that special local strategically important contract that really has to be done by Broward. And you can have more time on that and really work that to perfection while you use potentially an office supply contract that was done by someone else that has great pricing and services connected to it because it was done by a group that represented a larger group that suppliers were all keen to win. So those factors, I think, are driving when and why to use cooperative purchasing. So then when you're doing something, a procurement that you haven't done before, that's new, what do you usually do? And I think this next slide helps answer the question. You guys do the same thing that we do. We research, and we research procurement categories that are relevant. Those things that are common services and products that everyone needs. But we also look for innovative trends, new concepts, and ideas. So here, the bottom picture, honestly, we get a lot of new concepts and ideas when I have a meeting with a government leader like Bob Gleason, who tells me about something cool that you guys are doing, or something cool that maybe one of your neighboring communities are doing, or even the state potentially is doing that we hadn't heard about yet. So these meetings that we have with government leaders, when we come in and have one-on-one talks, I mean, it is to look for these innovative trends and new concepts, and then we can be taking that back with us to facilitate some solution maybe for a greater audience. And so the next slide kind of says this challenge, and I was hoping for a little feedback from people, but the challenge for all of us is, you got this company on the upper left here, this company with a great idea and great innovation. It's working really well in a particular government, and it's just one contract with one governmental entity. But yet the lower arrow going to the United States as a whole is this need is very widespread, or it will soon be widespread, and there's little opportunity to sort of take advantage of that existing innovation that's happening with one government and that one company doing it. So again, this is where us recognizing these types of things happening, where we try to bring some resources to either the government or the supplier or a cooperative organization to, hey, you guys should do a solicitation for this new thing because it's working well in one place and we see a great opportunity for it to work well many other places. So Mitzi, you want to weigh in on that at all, or?
No, I think you covered that really well. I mean, it just is, it kind of also talks to the fact that if it is a very centralized idea, we're the conduit to share with others across the country. I mean, I think that's how I, see the slide.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. And so the next slide, it's interesting that word share will show up fairly soon. But so what we do is we identify best of breed. And sometimes best of breed isn't the lowest cost. It's just like a really high performing contractor who really gets it. Their price may not be the lowest. Best value maybe is a nice combination of those things, price and value and performance. Best practice contracts are those contracts that really are serving multiple governments, and there's great opportunity for it to even serve more governments. And then these last two sort of descriptors, potential value and contract structure. The potential value is something that maybe it's back to that challenge where it's really something great in a particular place. This should get expanded into other places. And the contract structure, sometimes, we find that there is cooperative language in the solicitation that people had sort of forgotten about. And so we're identifying those things that that were actually part of the design, but kind of lost focus. Maybe the contract got handed off to someone because of all the turnover that occurs in government these days, and they've forgotten that they actually had a cooperative provision in their solicitation. And yeah, I think it's always good to consider that. It doesn't always apply, but I think it's always good to consider, that when you're doing. And I've noticed in a couple of instances where I've looked at Broward County contracts where that was really smart for them to do that. And for example, and I know that it was done by the public school system, but the online tutoring solicitation included language that would allow other school districts to buy from that contract. So that was really smart thinking on the part of the procurement team when they did that. So I'll go on to the next slide. To the point that Mitzi, the word that Mitzi used earlier, is what we do is we share with government. So we introduce these contracts that were identified, these ideas and concepts in these meetings that we participate in. That's part of our service to the state and local governments. And then what we also do is we collaborate. So when a government, takes an interest in some of these things, we want to help them build the business case to adopt or otherwise pursue, this change, if you will. And we've got the apples to orange thing. We got to avoid that. We got to make sure if we're comparing something that it is apples to apples or oranges to oranges. And we go through this process, through this collaboration, taking into account some other things too, the savings, the budget savings that may come from this contract, efficiency gains. So maybe there's no savings, but there's a great deal of efficiency gains. Some of that might happen with, some technology solutions that help, the remote workforce be more efficient. And it may come at a slight price, but that price better than renting more office space or reestablishing office space that you've already sort of shrunk. Those are just a lot of factors. Another thing that we always really like when we can say that we've got a solution that actually helps your supplier diversity program, because that's always an important factor in the public sector. So, some of the companies we really enjoy working with are those that are owned by historically disadvantaged businesses, whether minorities or women-owned businesses. That's always like a plus in our view, especially if they're high performing and they've got a service or product that people definitely have a need for. So, and then what we sort of have when we go to these meetings in our pockets, if you will, are sort of best practice solutions that are currently working in lots of places that may be appealing to a particular government. So that's kind of our list of categories that we currently have what we think are really great solutions for. And I'm not here to do any kind of pitch on any of these particularly, but one of the things, back to what I was saying earlier about us being in those meetings to find new ideas and concepts and innovative practices, is this challenging category. I always ask this question, what is challenging for you guys these days? Something I've heard a lot of lately is governments are not bidding some commodities because the suppliers have said we're not going to respond, or the response is like huge price increases that really don't fit the budget. But a lot of times it's like we won't be responding. I don't know if you guys have experienced that in Broward County, but it's something I've heard quite a bit in the last, really since the beginning of the year in meetings I've had, and it probably wasn't brand new then, but It just seems to be coming up more and more where uh, paper is really a tough commodity these days. Is that something you guys have experienced as well? I'm not getting any thumbs up or thumbs down on that one. Can
I'm
everyone hear
seeing
me
some
okay?
yeses. Yes, we can
Okay,
see you and hear you. I'm
okay,
seeing some yeses in the chat.
okay,
And they do have the ability to unmute themselves if they want to participate, just so you know.
yeah,
But a lot of people are responding yes in the chat, and giving you some thumbs up there.
yeah. So thank you for that. And so really, I'm just going to go so challenging categories. Anyone want to raise something um, from the discussion, or is there a particular, would you like to know a little bit more about one of these? There is one that I think has like direct relevance to Broward County, and it's probably new. And if we got some time, I could just briefly describe it, but I'm going to leave it up to you where we go next.
I'm not seeing anyone typing anything in the chat here. So if you want to go ahead and describe one that's challenging for you, or
Yeah,
that you have been seeing trending.
yeah, it's interesting because as I look at on this list, I just noticed it's not on our list. um, uh, it's and what I would call it um, is some people would call it social media advertising. They might call it, some people would call it transit advertising. I kind of call it groundswell marketing. And it's a, it's the wrapping of vehicles with your government message. So there's a company that we work with. So it's new. It somehow didn't make it on my list. Obviously, it shows that I wasn't here to make a pitch, but it's one that I'm pretty excited about. It's called Carver Ties, and they wrap vehicles with you know I'm going to call them public interest messages. For example, they helped the state of Delaware with its vaccination protocols and events and with masking. But they've also worked in they do a lot of work with tourism. And for example, I happen to know, I've seen the work with Tampa. Tampa actually has worked with Carver Ties where they have vehicles I think in Chicago and other large cities. These vehicles they use Uber and Lyft drivers' cars to be wrapped. And so they are in, the downtown Chicago area around hotels picking up people. And there's a car that says, come to Tampa. Um, so that's a kind of a real interesting, innovative solution for government. And it doesn't have to be tourism. There's all sorts of other applications, including higher education. We've seen higher ed executive MBA programs be promoted this way, and the company has some great data analytics that kind of shows how many impressions have been given to the audience, if you will, of their cars being driven in cities or sometimes at big events that draw crowds. I know that one of the things they've done for, I think it was a university, was to send the cars to Philadelphia Eagles games to pick people up from the games, and there'd be these cars wrapped with statements about the school. So that's just one that kind of like a current pet subject of mine. But some of these other topics on the list are well known areas. Cybersecurity certification. We're working with state ramp, and it's mostly been a state focus, but it will become more of a focus in local governments in the near future. As soon as states are kind of all on board, the focus then will turn to larger cities, larger counties, um, and and so that's another like really important solution that we think makes a lot of sense to be talking to people about. And so we've done that, and we're getting quite a bit of traction with that. And State Ramp is growing. You can look it up. I can send Bob some information about State Ramp. Again, it's more of a state focused thing for the time being, but ultimately it will impact. You'll find that some of your local contractors will have been State Ramp certified by either Florida or some other state. That makes them, a little safer for you to do business with than someone who hasn't gone through that process.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Bob has put a question in there. I didn't know if you saw that. He says, you mentioned Tampa. Please describe some of the other services provided and efforts undertaken with city, town, and county government purchasing offices. I think that was like from your challenging category question. I'm not sure, Bob, you might need to.
Well,
No, I
yeah.
know
So
that, there's a lot of efforts undertaken with the states. I'm just curious, like Cook County and Harris County, Texas, and some of the other larger municipal areas. I'm just curious to know, what you're doing with them.
you mean when it comes to State Ramp or just more broadly?
Just more broadly, anything that,
Yeah.
GSS is working on.
Oh yeah. So I was just visiting with Maricopa County, which is Arizona. It's the county where Phoenix is and where the state capital is. And I was talking with James Foley there. He's the deputy CPO in Maricopa County. And I think some of the things that struck an interest with him, he actually was very much interested in State Ramp because he knows a little bit about the effort that Arizona did. Some of the cybersecurity work that Arizona did actually led to State Ramp being formed about 2.5 years ago. I guess maybe in its infancy it was formed, maybe, and then they've been like kind of expanding their efforts and resources in the past year. So I'm trying to think.
Can you describe a little bit about State Ramp and what that involves for anybody here on the line that's working with IT?
Yeah, so one of the things, and Mitzi has a little bit more of a technical background than I do, but one of the things about State Ramp and this whole issue of cybersecurity, and it's very scary. It's a scary topic, and what we did in Arizona initially is, there were certain contracts where we knew the contractor was going to be accessing state data, which sometimes, included personal identifying information, sometimes medical information, where the contractor, being in the state's network, is a security breach risk for the state, because they need to make sure that their house is safe from cyber attack. And honestly, cyber attacks are happening everywhere, and in some sort of highly publicized stories, school districts have actually had their student information, sort of confiscated by hackers and then held for ransom. And in one case, a university in Illinois actually ended up shutting down. They just lost their data. Now, they were a private school and they were small enrollment. Mitzi, are you familiar with the Lincoln College story?
No, I'm not, but I do have another thing to add if anybody's still interested in like a specific example of why I think it is a great certification. But go ahead and finish the college thing.
Yeah, well, Lincoln College, they had their student system and information sort of stolen, and it was being held out for ransom. And they decided to just close down the university. Like I think they were so worried about so much liability. Just getting the data back was one thing, but I think they were also concerned about, liability for that student population, including alumni. They shut down the school. I mean, that's a pretty ugly story. I think one of the cybersecurity suppliers, Palo Alto Networks, I think they actually have a write-up on it on their website, but it was covered I believe, in the Wall Street Journal. But I'm going to hand it over to Mitzi, because I did a story, and Mitzi maybe has better information to share with you.
No. I wasn't going to do a story, but I was just going to have a real life example. Right before I left, we had left state police. That is, we were procuring a pretty large RFP for some software, and as you can imagine, all of our information is sensitive, just like a lot of other agencies. But where I think the state ramp could have really helped us is our IT department for the state is a completely different agency, and everything has to be reviewed by them, and they're short on staff. It really caused major delays in our RFP because we had to have our IT people pull away from what they were doing to review all of the individual specifications and requirements that we put from a security standpoint individually in our requirement, in our RFP. Had we had something that said a requirement, you need to be state ramp compliant, and our IT group bought off on it, then all of a sudden we've saved them time, we've saved us time, because you can go and lean on that certification, and the state ramp people actually go in periodically and monitor it so that your IT people don't have to. And in the days of staff shortages and too much on your plate, I think that's one of the big values for that one. We could go on and on about a lot of these categories as to how we can express some savings, whether it be time or money in a lot of these categories. But since we were on that one, I just thought I'd throw that in there because that was a distinct pain for us. So that was all.
Yeah, and Bob, I'm not sure I answered your question, so I've got something else to add, but let me just see if I answer your question, or you want me to elaborate on this a bit more.
No, that's good. Thanks.
So I mean, what I didn't get to before was this IoT, the Internet of Things. There's so many things, including our cars, including our refrigerators, including some of our toasters that are somehow connected to the internet. So when you think about that, for example, when the state sends its mailing list to some printed materials contractor who puts that mailing list into their computer, if that mailing list printer service company, I'm sorry, the mailing materials service companies hacked by a hacker, they've got this path to data that the state gave, and to the extent that that data is actually a link, suddenly they're into the state's network. So it really, when we first started this path in Arizona, we were kind of focused on these big contractors that were just obvious, but frankly, it's a pretty long list of suppliers that you ultimately will want to have some scrutiny over in terms of their protections from cybersecurity breaches. But it's a sad note to end on. So I will go, to the last slide. I know we're out of time. Thank you for letting us come to speak with you. I will share this slide deck with Alexa for distribution with those who would like it. You got my phone number there if you have ever any questions. Bob knows how to reach me as well. And, we're just really grateful for you guys doing a lunch and learn and learning about things. It's a sign of a progressive organization, which we love to associate with. So thanks again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
So Alexa, let me know if there's anything else. I just want to thank Rick and Mitzi for joining us in this series of lunch and learns that we have to understand better the sort of the universe of services and resources that are available for us to use out in the procurement universe. It's good to see you again, Rick. Good to meet you, Mitzi.
Nice to
For
meet
those
you.
of you who don't know, Rick is also a certified public accountant and a lawyer, JD lawyer, as well as a certified public procurement officer. So he's a jack of all trades, and I sometimes refer to him as the professor. He has a lot of deep understanding of many of the things that we have to deal with, and can cross the stovepipes of our interests. So, anybody else have any questions before we adjourn?
I'm not seeing anything further in the chat. So thank you both, Rick and Mitzi, as Bob has said. And thank you everyone for joining. If there are no any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end today's presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
See you, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.